Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Carlton People. Today I've got Bernard. This has been a long time coming, hasn't it?
Has been in the works for a few months at least.
I'm glad we've sat down. We've done this. I mean, school holidays, as you mentioned just before we hit record, is always a good time when your mind is clear from the week to week and bit more time to, and also a good time to talk about the footy.
Absolutely. Yeah, looking forward to it.
So, mate, why don't we start with you and your story? What is your story? How'd you become a supporter of the club?
So it's an interesting story, Tez. But unlike a lot of probably Carlton supporters who are raised with parents or family members who are really passionate about the club, my parents aren't big football supporters. They're not big fans of football at all. So growing up for me, when I was very young, I wasn't really exposed to it. And the only way I really got into a connection with sporting culture and the culture around footy in Melbourne was through my friends at primary school. So growing up where I did, northeastern suburbs, a lot of sort of second and third generation Italian and Greek migrants around the sort of Templestowe, Bulleen area. And at school, if you didn't barrack for Collingwood, you barracked for Carlton. So you really only had most of the students in my year level would have one of the two teams. And just got influenced by a few close friends of mine in primary school. And sort of probably around the age of 10 or 11 was when I decided, right, I'm a Carlton supporter. I'm just going to pick it up. I'm going to go with it. So it was probably around the year sort of 2000, 2001, where I took an active interest in footy, started following the Blues week to week. And then not too long after that in 2001, I remember for week after week, I would beg my dad to take me to my first ever game of footy. And he eventually took me to a game. Still remember it really clearly, early 2001 down at then Optus Oval. We played Adelaide Footy Club. It was a really wet, sort of dreary afternoon. Sat in the legend stand with my old man, first ever game. We lost badly, but was hooked after that. Just being there on that day, experiencing live football, the atmosphere, being amongst fellow supporters. It grabbed me from that day, and I haven't looked back since.
I've done 100 and something episodes of this series, and that is by far the best explanation of someone's first game. The fact that you can
Really?
remember it like that. Yeah. It's usually patchy, but no, you've nailed it.
No. I remember that there's many a Carlton game that really stands strong in the memory, but my first one definitely does, and I think that's where I was obviously interested in football. I decided that Carlton was going to be my team, but that afternoon, like, still remember some really clear moments from the game. Like Ryan Houlihan, very early in his career, kicked a couple of like really, really clever goals in the first quarter. And those things just stuck with me, and I've never lost those moments. And I think from that point in time, that was where the passion really started to grow. And from that moment on, I've sort of decided this is what I love. I love this football club. I want to experience this as much as I can. And Dad was reluctantly, he goes, finally, we'll take you to your game, and he's asking me the rules. So it was a fun experience, and I still now occasionally try and get him to at least one game a year. He says he's a Carlton supporter, but I haven't quite converted him to my level of passion just yet.
Yeah, right. I think also because we lost the game,
and
that still got you going. That's also what tells me you were ready for what was to come, because it's been a losing period for quite some time there, which we'll touch on in a moment. But what are some of your other core memories? I feel like we've all got, I don't know, a dozen or so, or half a dozen or so core memories. For you, are they games? Are they moments? Like what does stick out to you on the journey?
They're definitely games. For me, they're definitely games and moments in games. From that period when I was 11, 12, going into, starting high school, my memories would be that I'd most weeks I'd listen or watch the footy when I couldn't go. And I could probably at that stage, I'd be lucky to get to 2 or 3 games a year. I'd either go with my dad or a close friend of mine at school. We would go together. So those were my two sort of avenues to getting to the footy. I've got some strong memories of standing at Princess Park, watching us getting absolutely flattened by Sydney, 2003 or 4. Still remember that game really well. One of my a memory that stands out for me really clearly was we played Collingwood on a Saturday afternoon. It was 2004, and it was at the MCG still. And this was the first time I'd ever been to a live victory. Justin Davies kicked 4 goals in the last quarter. A player who, I don't know, he played a handful of games for the club. I don't remember how many, but he was around for a couple of years in that period. And we were down at 3/4 time by 15, 20 odd points. And we kicked 4 or 5 late in the game. Justin Davies kicked most of them in that final quarter to get us over the line. And that was my first ever victory that I've been to. So I still remember that. Just that, that's really when I think back, what was my moment where we experienced the joys of victory against an arch rival, Collingwood. It was a pretty miserable period for the club at the time too. So for us to get that victory, experience just being in the stands. We were sitting in the old part of the MCG, which is now demolished. Just an unforgettable day out.
Wow, you've brought up some memories that I've not heard before, which is cool. What do you make of that period? That period of, after salary cap, it was a long climb back.
Yeah, it was very depressing. I mean, it was as supporters, I didn't really follow the club until we were coming off the back of that 99, 2000, 2001 period where we sort of made the final. So from the time where I was really invested on a week-to-week basis as a teenager, we were winning wooden spoons most years. It was a dark period for the club. We had the stalwarts like Koutafidis and Favola and players of that ilk who were still running around and playing great footy, but there wasn't a lot around them. The Dennis Pagan era, and then we had obviously moving into Rats in the mid to late 2000s. Yeah, it was a tough time to be a supporter, and I think for me, probably in a way a good thing that I didn't get to the footy every week then like I do now, because it's hard seeing your team lose, but when you're at the ground and you see them lose, particularly if they're blowouts or big losses, you wear it even harder. It hits you even more. So it was a period that probably set the scene for then the next 20 years. Almost.
That's a good point. That's a good point. We did have we seemed to dip or rise our heads above water for a little period there, and it looked like we were about to start soaring, and that came crashing down pretty quickly. And then we've got this new group who, I'm actually really grateful that we're doing this end of 2023, because we finally see the waiting period that we've been living through. We finally see that start to come to fruition, and we start seeing finals footy again, and obviously a semi-final and a prelim. So what was 2023 like for you?
2023 was the most enjoyment I've had watching sport ever in my life. I mean, it was a year of two halves. It was also, the Blues gave me the most enjoyment out of football I'd ever had second half of the year. But the first half of the year was probably the most frustrated and despondent I've been for a long time. We had this little fake start where we sort of rolled over the line against GWS, and we were unconvincing, I think, against North. And then, gather round and into that period of, St Kilda, the St Kilda game, the Brisbane game, just those losses, the way we were moving the footy, the skills, the execution. It was just a really, really, it was a challenging time to be there. And I think particularly given the weight of expectation that built off the back of 2022 and the way that finished, there was so much anticipation building this season, really, like coming into round one. I think we were all feeling it as supporters, having missed out so, brutally closely at the end of 2022. Coming into the start of this year, I think the feeling was real excitement, anticipation, and then obviously when things weren't going to plan up until about round 12 or round 13, it was tough. It was really tough. I felt quite disengaged at points. I mean, I was still there every week, but just I was sitting in my seat, and I wouldn't react the same way I usually would. I would almost be expecting things to go the way they did when we played, Collingwood or the Melbourne game on the Friday night. Just a lot of moments where I would just put my head in my hands and think, not another year of this. Like, how many times do I keep turning up to this ground? And, after the promise of last year, it just felt like we were sort of going back to 2019 Carlton, 2018 Carlton, in the way that we were losing and the way that we were sort of playing. It was a difficult period to be a supporter, which I think then made the second half of the year so much more enjoyable, and so much more rewarding as well.
Yeah. I think the Melbourne game, the first time we played them this year, and I remember distinctly sitting in the crowd and it just looked painful the way we were moving the ball, as you said.
It
And I
did.
remember having a thought to myself that, is this just it? Like, this is just it. Like, are they too mentally scarred from losing that they don't know what it's like on the other side? They're never going to truly get there. And I think I might have even just accepted that. I think I
Mm.
might have accepted that. And so by the time it came to Essendon, we lost that one. I was like, okay, well, here comes another cycle of who's going to stick around, who's going to
Yeah.
be sacked. When in the winning streak, because for me, that took quite a few wins for me to truly enjoy. When did you start believing that it was real, so to speak?
Port Adelaide, the Saturday twilight game, which would have been, I think, our fourth win on the bounce from memory. So we went to Freo the week before, one away. It might have even been the Freo game. It was sort of that the Freo to Port sort of period where we had a couple of relatively easy wins against Gold Coast, then Hawthorn. And I remember, like, I saw you at the Hawthorn game, and I remember talking to you about the video you put out. It would have been a couple of weeks prior, where you played out the last 10 games, and you did the ladder predictor, and then you were breaking down week on week. And I remember very distinctly you saying the Port one is a massive one. If we can get 3 wins going into that Port Adelaide game on the Saturday afternoon, suddenly suddenly maybe there's a glimmer of hope there. Suddenly there's a potential. What are we looking at? And it was the convincing way that we won that afternoon. I was in my reserve seat with my good mate Patrick, and just really, really, the feeling in the stands that day was real jubilation. And I was thinking back, like, this is sort of got Sydney. There's a bit of Sydney 2022 that Friday night, back in the feeling in the crowd that night.
Yeah.
The atmosphere really built. I remember Jesse Motlop had a great game. Silvani kicked a couple of early goals that day. And we were on top from the outset. So I think in that period, it was that afternoon against Port where I thought, right, we're looking at an outside chance of finals here. Like, we really have to push for something.
Yeah. And the rest is history.
Where was it for you? Do you remember what moment it clicked for you?
Port Adelaide was where I felt it was real, but I still, in my mind, was thinking, oh, we probably will just have left it too late. We don't deserve to make it because of how poorly we started. I didn't see 10 wins or 9 or 10 wins on the trot. I didn't see that coming. And so I felt like we would just fall short, but we were going to go guns blazing and give it all we had. It wasn't until Collingwood/Melbourne the second time that I was super confident we'd make finals. I even declared it. I think I declared it the night we beat Melbourne, and everyone was like, "No, we've got to beat Gold Coast." And I'm like, "No, mate, we're playing finals." Yeah. So,
the atmosphere at that Melbourne game was unbelievable. Like, home game Saturday night, the Collingwood game was great, but obviously it was an away game, so we didn't have the weight of the majority of the fans there that night. But that Melbourne game, that final quarter, I just remember that, really clearly. Just sitting in the members, it was an unbelievable win, and I think that moment as well, it really clicked. I think, for me too. I thought, fine. I think at that point I was probably thinking home final. Forget finals. Like, we've got to push for 5th or 6th here. We need to pack out the MCG with our supporters. We need to have a home final. We need to really create a call. We need to recreate this atmosphere in a final. So that was a real turning point, I think too, in terms of where we would sit maybe in the final 8.
I feel like at the end of the day, I felt like the wait to get to finals was long and arduous and painful and all of that. And then there was a moment in the prelim where I probably at some point during the quarter time break where I sat and thought to myself, we've gone from a decade of no finals to sort of just getting in, and then I almost felt like we were skipping the queue because I was convinced we're playing in a granny after that first
Yeah.
quarter.
Oh, as we all were, particularly those who are up at the Gabba.
It was a special time.
Mm.
So what do you think is missing for the group to just take the next step? Is it just experience now?
I think so. I mean, if you look at our list, I don't think we lack a lot across the field. I feel really confident in the balance of the list and where we sit in terms of I think our backline's really settled. I think Brodie Kemp's come in and been a really positive story down back. Having Zach Williams back next year will be, I think, massive. And Mitch McGovern finally strung together, a relatively consistent season of football. And I thought he really showed what he can do down back. I was really pleased to have him back in the team. So, looking through to the midfield, who performed really, really well. And then, we've got a potent forward line now. We bring in Orazio Fantasia, potentially, he could have a little bit of X factor. I think I don't see a lot of holes. I really don't. Maybe a little bit of outside speed still, potentially being the one area. I mean, if you were going to identify an area where we potentially just need to, just tighten up in and maybe improve in. But I also think it's just now it was a year of transformation this year in terms of finding the formula that worked. We stuck with it into finals. It worked in finals. So it's proven that it works on the big stage. So now it's really just about putting that consistently together for us on a week-to-week basis, and hopefully bringing that standard of football, that standard of intensity to finals football once again. I think for us, it's a top 4 finish. It really has to be a top 4 finish for it to be a proper reality come the end of the season. We need to be sitting in the top 4.
Get that home prelim. After quarter time, so maybe more so the final siren, the next thought that went to my mind repeatedly was this had to be at the MCG. So we've got to earn the right. And I think we are one of a few clubs who have a serious noise advantage and an atmosphere advantage when it comes to big games. I think probably the Pies, when the Tigers are up and about, us, trying to think.
Potentially Essendon, when they fill it out as well, fill out the G. I think when the big 4 clubs have a packed out MCG and it's a home game for whichever team it is, I think the noise and energy that we bring is I think we certainly bring the most noise. Having a couple of friends who are at the Melbourne game, the semi-final, who are neutrals. One of them's a Richmond supporter, and he said he's never experienced the stands shake and the noise that was generated after Blake Acres' goal. And he's been at 17, 19 grand finals as a Richmond fan. He's seen a lot of success recently, and he said the noise that night was like something he's never experienced. So I certainly think that the energy and the passion that we generate as supporters, it can't be understated. I think we are so crucial in the success of this team.
Yeah. No, we are the competitive advantage. I still remember understanding for the very first time what it sounded like to hear people stand up.
Yeah.
I think when Doc marks that ball in the semi, I couldn't explain it any other way other than I could hear everyone stand up.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, it's like a blur thinking back to it now, but my really clear memory was that I didn't think from where I was on the other side, sitting on the other side of the ground, closer to sort of the MCC members. But 6 rows from the fence, like I was really lucky with my seats. But I didn't think from the angle we were at, you just had no perception of whether or not Doherty was going to mark the ball. And it just looked like the Melbourne player, I forget his name now, coming through there was potentially going to chop him off. But when he got that mark and he stepped aside and took the bounce, everyone was on their feet. And it was just this unbelievable moment as the ball hung in the air of, thinking you look down, you suddenly see we've got an outnumber. There's 2 players down there. And just sheer, I cannot describe the next 30 seconds. It was like nothing I've ever experienced. I've ever experienced. Unbelievable moments.
It's so good. I've been asking a lot around the essence of the club. So for you and your story, your primary school experience brings with it the exposure to Carlton.
Mm,
But what actually gets you stuck? Because you don't have, like you said, your parents didn't sort of like indoctrinate you, so to speak. So
mm.
what is it do you think about the club that makes us so passionate? Like, why do we care more than what the Western Bulldogs fans care?
It's a really good question. I think about this all the time. I mean, I can sort of speak from personal experience. There's two things that I think have really ingrained my passion for the club, and one has been the sense of belonging that you get when you're a part of something. That sense of community, when you're a part of supporting a football club that has the history that we do, that has the amazing people around it that we do, seeing people that you know at the football, being there together with this common passion. We're all from different walks of life, but as many people say, football's a great leveler, brings everyone together. Doesn't matter where you are, who you are, where you're from. We've all got this one common passion. It's Carlton Footy Club. So I think experiencing that and experiencing it live is what brings me back. That's what brings me back every week. The passion in the stands, the hugs with randoms, the high fives of the people around you, just experiencing those moments with people that you don't know, that you've never met before, and you may never meet again in your life. But for those 30 seconds, those 60 seconds after Blake Acres kicks the winner in a semi-final, everyone around you is your best friend. Everyone around you is going absolutely crazy, and you're experiencing it together. So I think those moments are what bring me back. I want to experience, like, they're addictive. You want to experience more of that. So that's certainly, it's coming back for more, and being part of that, that group where we all share that same passion, that common love. And another one, just for me, that is, I've thought about this a lot when I think about my history with the footy club, is the period where we were losing every week, 2016 to 2019, some of the darkest days, down against Freo 77-7 at halftime, or I'm trying to think, like losing
Getting
to
booed down the
Adelaide,
race.
losing to Adelaide with six, when they had, I don't know whether it was Adelaide. We played Adelaide or GWS late in 2018, and we had 16 on. They had 16 on the field. I think we
Yeah,
lost by
GWS.
90 or 100 points. GWS, yeah. I went to, and we played Adelaide, I think, the next week. I was at both those games, and I was just thinking, I'm here because I love the club, and I know that when we are finally good, when things do turn a corner, I'll be glad that I stuck through the moments where it hurt the most. I'll be glad that I actually put the time and effort into supporting no matter what, because the reward when things finally do click, when the wheel starts turning the other way, when the energy comes back into the stands from the supporters, when we start filling out the MCG again, it'll be, for me, all the more enjoyable. And the reward will be much greater. I just feel personally, having been able to experience the worst of it. It's sort of the losses, in a way, my passion grew, even though we were losing every week through that time. My desire to experience victory was sort of, be there, just to be there for a win in itself, was what kept me coming back. And I think that's where my own sort of personal level of investment in the club really grew out. It was a lot of those really, really difficult times.
Yeah, I got goosebumps as you were explaining that, because it brought me back to 2018, 2019, and there was I don't know if this is a significant game for anyone else, but do you remember when we played St Kilda late in 2019 at the
Yeah.
MCG?
Oh, I remember it well. Remember it really well. Sunny day. Harry Mackay kicked a ripping banana. Mark Murphy, I think Mark Murphy, actually, your man, kicked a really good goal that day as well. Remember
Yeah.
that?
You
That was
did.
great. We were probably 15th at the time, maybe. I mean, we were well out of finals contention, and so were they. But there would have been at least 50,000 there. Really,
There was I
really
remember
good day out of the footy.
I think Wiedering was a late out from memory, and I remember getting to the G and reading the news and thinking, "Okay, here we go." And there
Yeah.
were 55,000 there, and for some reason, because when you were talking about going during the losses and thinking to
Mm,
yourself, "Oh, when this turns around, it's gonna be worth it." I
mm,
think back to that game now, in retrospect, and the roar of the crowd that day, for no reason whatsoever,
mm,
no finals on the line for either side, really a nothing game, so to speak. And I remember distinctly the roar of the crowd that day when we won that game, and thinking, wow, this is giving me goosebumps, and we haven't even like come close to playing finals. So yeah, I don't know. Do you have any significantly random games like that stick out to you along the journey for this group?
Look, recently, yeah, there's a few. I would say one the first one that sticks out to me was earlier that year. We beat the Bulldogs, which I think was our first win for the year. From memory, I reckon Petrevski-Seton might have been close to best on that day. But that was a significant moment for me because the previous year we only won 2 games. And the game that we beat Essendon on the Saturday afternoon, which I think was our only win in Melbourne for the year, I played football that day, so I wasn't there. So I didn't experience a win, not one win in 2018. Going back to 2017, the last win that I was at was that really well-known, you'd remember this one well. We beat GWS by a point, I think, on a Sunday afternoon.
Yeah.
I think there's some footage floating around of you celebrating that somewhere online.
I was in China at the time. I remember that.
Correct. Yeah. So that was it. So that was the last win I was at. So it was almost 2 calendar years in between wins. So to that Bulldogs win in 2019. So for me, that was a significant one. It was like, I just want to see a win. You know, I'd been to that many games of footy in between. I'd been to probably 20 odd games in between. I just wanted to feel the win. I just wanted to sing the song. So that year was definitely that one. And then when we beat Brisbane on the Saturday afternoon, just after Brendan, I reckon it was a game just after Brendan Bolton got sacked. Cripps had probably potentially, arguably maybe his best ever game for the footy club. That was an unbelievable memory. So that was 2019. Those were the 2 games that really stood out to me in 2019. I mean, the back end of 2019 when David Teague came in was punctuated by a couple of, decent wins. We beat Adelaide at the MCG on a Saturday afternoon. I still remember that one pretty clearly. And I think because of this, I remember at the time there being a lot of interest among the supporters because of the way we'd done the Stocker trade, and we were needing Adelaide to finish lower than us and we needed to finish higher than them because of future picks. So that was one that stood out as well. And then obviously 2020 and 2021 was going into 2020. There was so much. I was so keen to, hopefully experience some joy. So losing the ability to go to the football made then being back there in 2022. I mean, a few games in 2021, sort of in between when we had lockdowns, etc. But back there to last year and when we were the Tigers game round 1 at the G stands out as one of my favourite ever moments at the football. That last quarter, that Zach Fisher goal was absolutely like pandemonium in the stands that night.
Yeah.
Really, really great day out. Great night out. And then the Sydney game that year as well was a real highlight. Those, thinking back at the last few years, those are probably the 4 or 5 games that stand out as great games to be at, really enjoyable wins to be at for different reasons. And just moments that I'm glad that I've experienced, and I was, able to sit with my best mates, sit in my reserve seat and just be part of the atmosphere. And that's what I love. It's absolutely what I love doing.
Yeah. I wouldn't change the journey for the world. I mean,
No.
we are part of a generation where we are born and when our memories really kick in, we are supporters that start the journey losing a lot and then sort of go through the motions with the club and how the club learned to win, as opposed to starting the journey just winning all the time. You almost get a false sense of reality of what it truly takes to win. And I find it really interesting talking to those who grew up with multiple premierships because you start off at the top. There's only one way you can go.
Yeah.
And
you kind of wonder, will it ever be this good again for those people? Like you peak at the start, and then and what comes after that? Is it ever going to recreate that? Whereas I know for myself and yourself, I mean, we've never experienced that. So 1995, I didn't know what football was. I was alive, but couldn't tell you. Not even 99 prelim. I wasn't really a footy fan at that stage. So it's now experiencing it now. I agree. There's nothing better than experiencing the finals that we did in 23 this year, and the journey. For all the lows and repetitive losses and uncompetitive performances and just head in hands moments, of which there were numerous moments. it is all worth it when things turned as they did. You look back and go, I wouldn't change it. Absolutely right. I agree with you 100%.
No, bang on. So as we head into 2024, well, actually more than just 2024, as we head into the future, when do you think the group next lift up the cup?
This I hesitate to make sweeping predictions because
Okay.
I always tend to eat my words or be reminded by mates of mine about the time in 2018 when we kicked the first 5 goals against Richmond, and I'm telling all my mates that we're making finals, and then we win the spoon. So look, I'm an optimist, but at the same time, I hate to make the big call. But look, based on this year, I really think the time has to be now. It has to be, given the age demographic of the group, what we've been through this year. The ground swell of support that has just built around this club in the last 12 months has been unbelievable. Like we're selling out Marvel when we play there. We're getting 80,000 plus to home games at the G. It has to. I mean, 2024 would be just. I mean, I think it would just be. It'd be the ultimate. So I think, given where we're at, I'd love it to be next year. All things, injuries and all things going the way that they hopefully should. I sort of feel like the time, given where we're at, the time has to be now.
Yeah.
I couldn't possibly imagine going through another full rebuild, the whole process yet again, and thinking, what have we got to show for it? I think we've got the talent. There's no doubt about it. I feel like we've got the club administratively is in a great position. Everything's there. The ingredients are there. We just need to put it together now. I mean, what do you sort of have a similar feeling around next year and where your expectations lie?
Yeah. So for me, we are in the premiership window.
Yeah.
I can't believe I'm saying that at times. I often have to pinch myself.
Yeah.
I believe we are in the window. I feel like it's the Patrick Cripps era window, and then there might be another window after that because there is still quite a young core in this group.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think the next 3 to 5 years are our shot, and I actually think, without putting too much pressure on it, I don't think there's a better position for us than 2024 because of the way in which the team is, the contracts, like a lot of it is all in place already.
Yeah.
We don't have big contract situations to have to worry about like we have in the last few years. Like this is the team, this is the best team that we'll have for a while, I believe. And so, yeah, I'm really. I mean, we're filming this, and the boys have just gone on their 3-week Christmas break. So, if only they knew. I'm sure they do know, like what's at stake and
I'm sure they're
how
aware.
close they are, and
Yeah.
just to commit in this 3-week break and get ahead of the rest of the competition. I think they can do it next year. I really do believe that.
No, I agree. I certainly think they can. It's an incredibly even. I mean, the blessing of AFL, but also the curse is that it's such an even competition,
Yeah.
and getting that competitive advantage is sometimes so difficult. So, from a training and player management perspective, you just hope they're leaving no stone unturned. Which I'm sure and I'm sure each preseason, they'd probably go in with a similar rhetoric of how they're aiming to tackle the start of the following year. But I just think from where we've come and the way we finished off 2023, the season has to start well. It really does, and we need to set ourselves up from the start. I think I was probably lulled into a little bit of a false sense of security this year when we were sort of 3 wins and a draw from the first 4 games, because although we were 3 wins and a draw, I don't think we were convincing at all. But for some reason, I bought into it. So at the time, and thought, we're ready to go now. And then, the next 8 to 10 weeks were so obviously demoralising. So I think starting the season well is going to really, build a platform for what's hopefully a really successful season.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Well, mate, I'm glad we did this. Thank you so
Yeah,
much
so
for
am
your
I.
time.
It's been a lot of fun. Thanks, Tez.
It is, mate. It is. It's good. They're good memories, and your family and your future generations will, and you, I guess, will get to look back on this one day, and hopefully you're right. Hopefully it was 2024 all along, and that was worth the wait.
12 months time, let's hopefully look back at this and smile and realize that we were right.
100%. Go Blues, mate.
Thanks, Tez. Go Baggers.